Hello everyone, welcome back to DH Movie Recap. Today, I will introduce the movie Limitless 2021 starring Bradley Cooper, about a struggling writer who is stuck in a rut. Thanks to a special drug, he can calculate the speed and trajectory of the bullet. When the gunshot rings out, Eddie, who could have perfectly dodged the assassination, lets the bullet graze his shoulder. In this situation, only sustaining a minor injury, it could win the most votes, due to Eddie's precise calculation ability. Thanks to an experimental pill called NZT48, the average person only uses 20% of their brain, but taking this pill can enhance brain function to 100%. 3 months ago, Eddie was still a failed writer wandering the streets. Sitting in front of his computer, he couldn't write a single word. His wife had already divorced him. Even his girlfriend of 7 years broke up with him. He wandered aimlessly on the street and ran into Kane, whom he hadn't seen in a long time. This encounter directly triggered a change in his fate afterward. Through their conversation, Eddie learned that Kane is now working at a pharmaceutical company. Kane felt very sympathetic to his tragic situation, so Kane generously gave him an expensive pill called NZT. Eddie doesn't care much, but Kane is certain that Eddie will come back to find him after using it. After saying that, he stands up and leaves. Eddie knows he has nothing left to lose. Might as well take a risk. Half believing, he puts the pill in his mouth. On the way back to the apartment, that was his landlady, Veronica. She said nothing and immediately pulled him into a corner, berating him harshly. As a social outcast, Eddie just wanted to find a place to bury himself. Just when he was worrying about next month's rent, the drug started to take effect. A marvelous sensation shot straight to his head. He instantly grasped every detail around him. Even Eddie's emotions and thoughts began to change. Ignoring Veronica's harsh words as she berated him for being late on rent, this only made Eddie's mind work even harder. Eddie began to observe the landlord, not even missing a drop of sweat. He used his fastest speed to gather useful information from Veronica, combining it with the surroundings that were both familiar and strange. Without hesitation, Eddie began his counterattack. He speculated that Veronica's marriage was unhappy. Moreover, she was having issues in law school. Veronica was stunned. She didn't remember ever mentioning that she was studying law. Eddie explained that a typical student wouldn't carry around a dull academic book by a deceased judge. Veronica immediately thought Eddie had been following her. He responded that he had only seen a corner. He still remembers reading this book 12 years ago. His subconscious made him recall something long forgotten. As long as he wants to, he can extract any perspective he has ever seen for use. Eddie clearly told the landlord, this book is full of nonsense. If she wants to complete her thesis smoothly, he can provide materials for her. Veronica looked at him in disbelief. Very quickly, the two started exchanging academic ideas. A few brief words had already won over the woman. The thesis that usually takes 6 months to complete, Eddie solved in less than half an hour. When he returned to his room, Eddie felt his mind becoming incredibly sharp. The surprising thing was that he hadn't experienced any side effects so far, while the effects of the drug were still active. Eddie hurriedly sat back in front of his computer. With a surge of inspiration, Eddie's hands typed rapidly on the keyboard. The novel he had been nurturing for some time finally took shape. The next day, he placed the completed novel on the publisher's desk. The female editor finished reading the entire book in under 40 minutes, and called him, requesting that he quickly write the next part. But the effect of the drug only lasted 6 hours. No matter how hard Eddie tried, he couldn't find any inspiration. In his desperation, he went to Kane's house. Unexpectedly, as soon as he walked in, he found Kane murdered. Eddie was immediately stunned. He hurriedly found a corner to hide. In a panic, he also called the police. But then he reconsidered. Maybe the killer harmed Kane to find something. Eddie immediately thought of that pill. So the question is, did they find it or not? He hurriedly put on gloves and frantically searched the room, but no matter how much he rummaged, searching everywhere he could, he still couldn't find what he wanted. This made him extremely tired. Eddie grumbled and sat down on the sofa. Suddenly, a food delivery caught his attention. Very quickly, he noticed the dishwasher not far away. That's right, Kane had never cooked for himself. Why is there a dishwasher? There must be something suspicious inside. Just as expected, Eddie immediately discovered something. He found a pile of papers, some money, and a big bag of pills. Eddie took the pills according to the prescribed dosage and schedule. With the support of the medication, Eddie felt like the colors of the whole world became brighter. He only took 4 days to complete a novel, and through effective learning, he learned to play the piano in 3 days. In 2 days, he could master a language. Mathematics also became useful. Indeed, the new brain was truly effective. At the casino, Eddie was unbeatable. The ability to remember instantly after seeing some confusing academic theories and specialized terms started coming out of his mouth. Eddie spoke fluently. The girls were easily captivated. Suddenly, he became incredibly wise. He decided to enter the stock market. Eddie made $2,000 in a day with just $800 left. The next day, it turned into $7,500. But making money that way is still too slow. He needed more capital. Eddie turned to borrow 100,000 VND from loan sharks. But they didn't believe this poor kid could turn his life around. However, Eddie guaranteed he could multiply the money fivefold in 4 days. Eddie Bevis surely had inside information, but Eddie responded to him by just using calculation rules to come up with some formulas. Seeing Bevis getting impatient, Eddie had no choice but to gamble with his life. Once he failed, this life would belong to Bevis. Quickly, Bevis gave him some money. Eddie relentlessly returned to the company by continuously increasing the dosage. His money-making process was significantly shortened. In addition to precise calculations and tight reasoning, Eddie was thriving in the stock market. His colleagues asked him, "Why did you buy shares in a company that was just accused?" Eddie replied that the company wouldn't be affected by the accusation. Next week, it would still rise. Eddie calculated very skillfully. Indeed, in just a few short days, he made over $2 million USD. The news spread quickly. Eddie instantly became famous. His girlfriend came back to him. He even caught the attention of the stock tycoon, Otis. His assistant had warned him that Otis wasn't easy to deal with. One second they could be best friends. The next second Otis might want to kill him. Eddie told him not to worry. "Everyone knows what I'm capable of." Otis is curious about what Eddie's secret is. Eddie replies that he conducts extensive market research, thoroughly understanding each company's business structure. Blindly buying a company led by someone without leadership skills can't sustain long-term profits. To achieve consistent high income, you have to deeply penetrate the market, directly acquiring the necessary information from market rumors. The actual stock price isn't based on the company's performance, but mainly on capturing the crowd psychology. Once you discover a way to predict stock prices and spread rumors from person to person, the result naturally goes without saying. These words left some people in a daze. They found it hard to imagine that in just 10 days, Eddie had accumulated wealth by investing in stocks this way. On the way back, Eddie cleverly expressed his lofty ideas, finally overcoming Otis's challenge. Eddie couldn't help but daydream that soon he could become president. Surprisingly, before he even finished dreaming, he realized something seemed wrong with his body. A sudden dizziness attacked him. Eddie didn't even have time to react. He had already crossed more than 20 blocks, appearing in an unfamiliar environment. In just a blink of an eye, he was suddenly provoked, for no reason, by some big eddies. This isn't good at all. After all, he doesn't know how to fight. Suddenly, a forgotten memory awakened. Eddie struck decisively as if he had learned martial arts before. Even in a dangerous situation, he could stay calm and turn the tide. He relied on the copying skills in his mind. In just a few moves, he defeated all his opponents. After finishing, he smoothly sprinted forward, waiting for the effects of the drug to fully wear off. It took Eddie a moment to react. But the worst part is that he had no idea what happened in the 6 hours prior. His mind was completely blank. Moreover, when he was discussing the stock market with Otis, he found it very difficult to focus. Occasionally, he would shift his attention to the TV. As for Otis's questions, you could say he didn't know anything. Otis could hardly imagine that just overnight. Yesterday, he was still the guy who amazed everyone. Now, he's disappointing them like this. Otis reminded him that the world changes every second. If you're not careful, society will leave you behind. But Eddie felt extremely uncomfortable. He rushed outside to vomit. Eddie went home and tried to calm himself down. Suddenly, he received a call from Stella. Stella hasn't contacted him for 8 years. Did her brother give him anything? That thing is very dangerous. It's best not to interact with it anymore. Eddie is suffering and immediately wants to meet Stella, but she directly refused him. After Eddie's desperate pleading, Stella finally agreed. Eddie realized that this wasn't right. He hurriedly flipped through Kane's previous notebooks. Because this drug had been researched, does it mean someone else is using it? He called one person after another, only to find that most of them were already dead. After much difficulty, he finally reached someone alive. And that person was right behind him. Eddie couldn't believe it. He didn't dare to speak up, stood up, wanting to leave. Unexpectedly, the man named Finn followed closely behind. Realizing the situation was bad, Eddie quickened his pace. He ran frantically down the street at top speed. A fierce chase began. Eddie could hardly imagine what the other would do if he got caught. He didn't want to mess around with his life. Anyway, now that he's making money, he can't easily go looking for death. On the way, Eddie accidentally bumped into a pedestrian, and then almost got hit by a car at the intersection. But luckily, nothing dangerous happened. This gave him just enough time to escape. While Finn hadn't caught up yet, Eddie hailed a taxi, didn't dare to delay for a second. told the driver to quickly drive away. Thanks to that, luckily escaped the danger. Eddie went through countless difficulties and finally reached a restaurant. Strangely, he couldn't find the person he wanted to meet. Suddenly, someone called out to him. Eddie was confused. The beautiful Stella from his memories. Again, becoming like this. Eddie anxiously moves to sit down. The woman knew she had become this haggard. This is also why she always refused to see Eddie. But this was only secondary. But Stella's next words shocked him. It turns out she had also used NZT, this drug, to her at the lowest point in her life. It really had a huge effect. In an instant, her work efficiency skyrocketed. But she was smart enough to quickly realize that no one can endure a brain running at such high speed without breaking down, so she stopped taking the pills. At first, she only had mild headaches. Then she became sick and started vomiting. When she finally reunited with her younger brother, her brother told her that long-term drug users have all died. After that, she found it very hard to concentrate. But fortunately, she stopped taking the drug in time. Now, she's just a little confused. Then she asked Eddie how much he had taken. Eddie honestly replied that he had taken a lot. Stella could only comfort him by saying that maybe the drug had been improved. Who knows, maybe there are no more side effects. After leaving the restaurant, Stella reminded him that he still couldn't stop taking the medication yet. If he stopped, he might die immediately. What he needed to do was gradually reduce the dosage so that his body could slowly adapt. Eddie realized he couldn't be without NZT. He needed to know who invented this drug. Unfortunately, Stella couldn't tell him either. Eddie frantically walks down the street. On one hand, he's worried about being chased by Finn. On the other hand, he's exhausted and has to figure out how to get home for his meds. With no other option, he turns to his girlfriend. Linda is shocked. She had never seen Eddie in such a miserable state. The woman immediately wants to take him to the hospital. Eddie refuses without a second thought. He told his girlfriend that he needed to take his meds. Eddie didn't know how to explain it, so he had to tell her everything. That's when Linda finally understood the impressive behavior her boyfriend had shown lately. It was all because the pills were taking effect. She knew her boyfriend wanted her to get the meds. Eddie pretended to refuse a little, but he ultimately decided to let his girlfriend help him. But the drugs had been moved by him long ago. Linda could never have imagined Eddie would leave the drugs at her house. It's unbelievable. She quickly found a large bag of drugs. Looking at this harmful stuff, Linda smiled helplessly. She reported to her boyfriend that she had gotten the drugs, but she noticed that someone seemed to be following her. Eddie immediately panicked. He hoped she could shake them off. Unfortunately, the car got stuck in traffic shortly after. Moreover, the person got out of the car. Eddie, he's coming towards you. Linda, oh my God. Luckily, Linda reacted quickly, so she didn't get caught. She ran forward with all her strength. Finn chased closely behind. Help me, help me. Linda cleverly asked two big men on the street for help. Luckily, they were both very eager to assist. They warned Finn not to do anything reckless, but he didn't want to heed the warning. He pulled out a knife and stabbed one of the two men. Seeing that the two men couldn't help, Linda quickly fled. When Finn looked back at Linda, she had disappeared. Taking advantage of the complex surroundings, Linda skillfully hides herself temporarily, but Finn doesn't give up. She fearfully pleads for help from Eddie. Linda knows that Finn will find her sooner or later. Now, she doesn't know what to do. After hearing that Finn had killed two people, Eddie immediately can't sit still. After confirming Finn won't temporarily find his girlfriend, he told Linda to try taking a pill. Linda was confused. Eddie told her that she would understand once she took it. Linda couldn't believe she could escape death at the hands of a madman with a weapon. Eddie hoped his girlfriend would listen to him. After all, it was better than sitting and waiting to die. Linda reluctantly unlocked the bag. Panicked, she fumbled for the pill. Right after that, she shoved the pill into her mouth. She saw Finn approaching. He was getting closer and closer. Her anxious heart finally stopped beating. She turned her head abruptly. It was surprising to see another version of herself. As the pill took effect, Linda's world began to change. Calm down. She started observing her surroundings. Linda began to notice a man holding a baseball bat. On the other side, a father and son were playing on the ice rink. The sharp ice skates gliding on the ice inspired her. Linda was determined to charge forward. Eddie Finn noticed the situation and immediately chased after her. A fierce life-or-death battle began. The agile woman leaped onto the ice rink. She couldn't afford to be careless. Taking advantage of the surrounding structures, she moved fluidly, like a fish in water, overcoming many obstacles, running wildly through the crowd. Seeing the situation turn bad, Finn pulled out a weapon hidden in his coat and aggressively advanced toward Linda. At the critical moment, Linda lifted someone up. A quick spin toward the approaching Finn. Finn's face gets injured by the ice skate and he falls to the ground instantly. After Linda returns the girl to her father, she immediately slips away. she successfully delivered the pill. Eddie swallows the life-saving pill and gradually wakes up. The next day, Eddie apologizes to Linda. He promises not to put his girlfriend in danger again, but Linda still couldn't accept him for who he was. She understood that in front of her was just someone temporarily smart due to the effects of the drug, but Eddie thought that was good enough. He could use this ability to enter the upper class. Linda couldn't stand it anymore and immediately suggested they break up. Eddie panicked. He said that after handling a few things, he would quit the drug. Linda decided to trust him one more time. Eddie returned to the investor's company after getting back to normal, but the investor informed him that he had been fired. No matter how much Eddie explained that he was sick, the investor didn't care. The business world changes rapidly. It can't stop for even a moment. As long as you're not completely dead and still have a breath, you must persevere. Eddie's sudden disappearance left Otis completely disappointed in him. Now, he doesn't want to waste time with Eddie here. In an emergency situation, Eddie said he had already sent the plan. The legendary investor replied that he didn't tell him to do these things. However, he was very pleased with Eddie's plan. Eddie sharply noticed things that the legendary investor's team had overlooked. He found this observational ability incredible. Eddie stayed on due to his own efforts. After continuously using NZT for 2 months, during this time, he presided over the largest merger plan in commercial history. He learned all the skills of legendary investors, and he discovered that by simply eating on time, avoiding tobacco and alcohol, his body wouldn't malfunction. But he knew he couldn't just sit and eat without doing anything. It was better to figure out how to manufacture the pill. He spent a huge amount of money hiring a pharmaceutical plant to analyze the components of NZT and replicate the drug. To ensure safety, the doctor needs 2 years for clinical trials, but his medication can't last that long. Eddie, wealthy and decisive, immediately spends $200 million. He hopes to see results within 6 months. Tempted by the money, the other side had to agree. Eddie returns to the company and has a disagreement with Otis. He is not pleased with Eddie's outstanding talent. He completely doesn't understand the struggles they went through when starting the business. He said it and wanted to kick Eddie out, and this was also part of Eddie's plan. The next day, he started his own company. He went from being Otis's subordinate to becoming his rival. This time, the old man wasn't happy. He ordered Eddie to shut down his company. Turns out the old man had known his secret and forcefully acquired Eddie's pharmaceutical factory, so the factory can no longer supply Eddie with an unlimited amount of drugs. As soon as the drugs stop, the company's bankruptcy is only a matter of time. Who would have thought Eddie would just smile lightly after hearing this? Then he casually mentioned something irrelevant. A truck is going to hit a taxi. What? The truck is moving at 80 kilometers per hour, and the driver is distracted, texting. He's about to crash into a taxi 18 meters away. Which truck? As soon as he finished speaking, the two vehicles collided. The investors were stunned. In reality, the pill has now been improved. Eddie's team has gone through hundreds of trials, constantly adjusting and completely recycling, eliminating all side effects. Currently, even without using drugs, he can still keep his brain operating at 100%. He just needs to touch and can diagnose the old man with dilated cardiomyopathy. A heart transplant with an artificial heart is needed. Eddie advises him to live well in the coming days and stop thinking about fighting him. After saying that, Eddie turned and left. At the end of the movie, Eddie and his girlfriend make up. The two enjoy a peaceful time at the famous restaurant. The movie Limitless ends here. Thank you for watching until the end. Don't forget to leave your comments below about this movie.